we've been going on this journey around the Muslim world. This is Hyde Park, isn't it?
The Regent's Park.
Regent's Park, near the Central Mosque. And we're with Sister Salma Yaqub, both critic and social commentator, as well as an advocate for the Muslims. In fact, apologize for your comments, Mr. Whitby, right?
You're asking him to apologize.
Yeah.
And you did an extraordinary job on Hard Talk, which is considered to be a really difficult talk show to do. You've just recently been elected to the City Council of Birmingham, so that's going to change things for you. And you're also a mother of three sons, and you're a psychotherapist. Now, you're born and bred in the UK, and you're really a new generation of Muslim, because I think your parents' generation and the previous generation was largely an immigrant generation that came to England. They were really trying to assimilate and be as low-key as possible, not make waves. So you're really representing now an urban professional group of Muslims that are committed to their religion. So you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Well, as far as my public role, I have to say it was very accidental. As you mentioned, I'm a mum and a psychotherapist. But really 9/11 changed my life, seeing what happened at the Twin Towers, seeing how suddenly Islam as a whole was being branded a terrorist religion, feeling the pain of the people who were the victims of that attack, and also seeing the injustice of a superpower then threatening the poorest country in the world, Afghanistan. I mean, we have to go back now because obviously everybody knows about Iraq, but that's how it started. And it really made me question, well, what's my place in this? And I myself was spat on whilst I was with one of my young sons.
For wearing a hijab,
city centre, because I'm visibly Muslim. And I've never had to face any kind of racism or anything like that. Birmingham was a great city to live in. It's multicultural and all the rest of it. But really what made me upset wasn't the fact this one person had done this, it was the fact that everybody else walked on by. And when I questioned my heart about that, I thought, Salma, you've seen a lot of things that you don't agree with. You've got mad watching the news, but what have you done about it? And I decided that being passive is really just as bad as being complicit. And for the first time, this verse that I've kind of read so many times, stand up for justice, even if it goes against yourselves or your families, your kith, be they rich or poor. It just sounds so easy, just stand up for justice. But when I started to speak out about the war in Afghanistan, being British, it was our troops that were going to go into that country. People then started saying, well, you're unpatriotic, and being visibly Muslim, perhaps you're supporting Osama bin Laden and you're on the side of the terrorists. It's that you're either with us or against us. And my father was also saying, look, just stay quiet. People are angry, and if we speak up, it's not appropriate for us to do so. One of the worst parts of it was feeling so isolated. And actually some of our friends had come and gathered in our homes, and we'd thought about, well, where would we go? Which country would we go to? Who knows us? Who believes us? And, are our kids safe? And Bosnia only happened in the 1990s, and it's a European country, and they were white Muslims, and we are the children of immigrants, we're brown, and, so
Noam Chomsky talks about the atomization of our culture. He says we often fail to realize how many people actually think like we do, but because we don't meet together and talk to each other about it. So people watch the news atomized, whereas the world is actually a world of molecules. It's atoms that bond together.
I've been brought up, with this whole Islam is justice and jihad, and yet when it came to our own homes, our own country, silence from people who I expected to take up the leadership role. And I saw how fear really played such a big part in silencing us, and then they tried to justify it theologically. And it really didn't sit right with my heart, and it was very difficult for someone like myself to come out and speak, because I'm not knowledgeable, I'm not a scholar.
Now, do you think being a South Asian woman in a culture that really sees women that speak out as, it's just a taboo almost, what type of, what did you come up against?
Well, it was all the time. I mean, it's seen as immodest. I mean, there's lots of things that you get called as a woman when you stand up and speak. And one of the worst things is when they undermine you as a modest woman, as in, have you got no shame? They confuse hijab with silence. And people will go to my husband and say, where's your sense of honour as her husband? How can you let your wife
How can you let your wife,
speak
don't you have a
in
ghayra?
public? That's it.
Right.
These are
What's
the
his
exact
response for
words.
that?
Well, he just said, I'm proud of what she's doing. I am here, and she's got something to say, and I'm supporting her in saying that. I mean, my husband, mashallah, is absolutely fantastic, but the fact is he had to hear that, and obviously it's not nice for any husband to have to hear these
Sure.
things about his wife. But I think because the issue was so serious, and because so few other people were coming out, in a way, my line was almost, well, if the men spoke out, I wouldn't need to come out.
It's just there's something funny about it that men are. I don't know if it's fear, if there's a real fear, or if it's maybe a shame factor that they themselves aren't doing it. Like she's making us look bad because maybe the men aren't doing what they should be doing.
It'd be nice if it was shame because it showed it was coming from a conscience point of view. But to be honest, I think a lot of it was arrogance and being judgmental.
Yeah.
And saying this is not your place. And if they had said, well, we'll do it, that would have been okay. And even now, when I just ran in an election campaign, they were outside the mosques saying that you should not be voting for a woman. And I was,
Well, then we've got the ones that are saying you shouldn't be voting,
Full
period.
stop.
Full stop, right.
and then you've got the ones that said you can't vote for a woman, even though we're talking about a city councillor, not Khalif, right? And then you've got the kind of people saying, well, yes, it would be so shameful if a woman beat a male candidate. So they'll
They're
come
worried about your candidates?
because they set
Are there
up
other Muslims? Were you running against other?
2 other Muslim men.
And they were
because,
males?
2 other
Yes.
Muslim men.
And you beat them?
Yes,
Okay.
by a big majority.
Oh,
so
really? Well, that shows you, I think, then that there is support. Or did they
Yes.
get the women going?
Do you know a lot of Muslims?
Mainly through work, just different environments and school.
I've been to places like Afghanistan. We grew up in India, where I think women are extremely emancipated, very liberated. And I think there's a huge amount of misinformation about A, the role of Islam, B, the role of women within Islam. And I just think these are misperceptions that need to be addressed at some point. So I would say they're extremely strong, extremely liberated, independent women.
Most people that I've known with, they were sort of not more modern, less traditionalist, sort of through work and at school. Most people that I've known wouldn't have worn the veil.
The whole concept of the veil needs to be understood, and it's seen as something that is quite oppressive in some societies. It's seen as something which is very much part of your culture. So if you wear it and you wear it with pride, I don't see an issue with it at all.
As a teacher, do you notice the segregation when you notice the Muslim girls wearing the hijab?
Well, I was actually quite surprised to see that for many of them it didn't change, that the school that I teach in, they seemed quite well integrated. And I was really happy to see that they had members of friends from every group represented.
But I think you have a lot of young Muslim women who are out there, who are independent, who are working, who are not, who have a voice. And I think, again, I mean, it's really to celebrate those kind of women.
out of the 22 most powerful positions on the council, we have a cabinet. There's not one single ethnic minority person.
Isn't that amazing?
Right?
Now, is
And
that a
I-
failure of the ethnic minorities?
No,
All right.
because I can tell you for a fact that ethnic minorities, they're very active in elections. It's not the case they're outside of the process. Ironically, some of the practicing Muslims, because they're like, oh, this is a kuffar ideology and we don't want to vote. That
But that's a minority.
But that's a minority. The vast majority really get stuck in, right? And we have 14 Labour councillors, 7 Liberal Democrat councillors. So we have, over 20, and there's myself now.
So where's the breakdown? Why is
So there is still an institutional barrier.
There's
we have
barriers.
educated people, we have the skills, and this is why I put it as a question in the
there's-
first council
There's
meeting.
white people
What's
that
going
don't
on?
want to hand it over to
And women, only 3 out of the top 22 jobs are held by women. So again, the Western democracies like to go on
No,
about
I know, it's
inclusion.
amazing. We were talking
So-
about, they're demanding, for instance, in Afghanistan, the Anglo-American alliance there is, demanding that a third of the
30%.
30% of the parliament be women. And I'm like, well, wait a second, where is that in a Western
Well,
democracy?
I raised this, and you know what I was told by the leader of the council? go to Burnley or Oldham. He couldn't
Yes.
even answer the question, and now it's raised this whole controversy in Birmingham. Just about to raise it, and it's a perfectly legitimate question, but they just don't like being asked it by, and it's really because I'm a woman and because I'm from the ethnic minority. So whilst there's a lot of lip service to multiculturalism and diversity and democracy and women's rights, sadly still in the 21st century we're having to fight for these basic things.
But I
still.
liked the fact that, you know, you were, as you were saying, you were surprised to see that you have such great support from the press.
Yeah, and ironically, because the press are always in there as well. So in the hall, when I put this point, the guy who was attacking me for even raising it was clapped by the councillors. And even the opposition stayed quiet. But the next day, it became headline news that this is what happened in the council.
Is that Whittleby?
So Whitby's the leader of the council.
Whitby.
So he thought...
So is that why you demanded an apology?
Yeah.
Did he apologize?
He hasn't yet, but this is ongoing. This is just today.
Don't demand an apology. I always prefer demanding that they beg your pardon. Yeah, because apologies still, they empower the person that did the wrong. You can go and try to get your recourse of this and that, but if I change that person's mind, if I change what's in their mind, the society's going to change as it is. Now, if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, when he came into Mecca, he said, "Man dakhala bayta Abi Sufyan kana amina." Whoever goes into the house of Abu Sufyan, who was his enemy and fought him for almost 20 years, he honored him when he was in that power. Do you know, the communists could never do that. The communists had to pull them all out of their houses,
But that's still the
string them up.
external, trying to affect somebody's internal, right?
He's changing the minds. He changed the heart of Abu Sufyan.
Yeah, through an external action.
What is the primary change that you would like to see for Muslim women in Britain?
Well, a sense of empowerment, a sense of pride in ourselves as Muslim women, and overcoming those stereotypes, you know, that we're all oppressed, suppressed, depressed, and, you know, we're all under the thumb of our fathers or husbands. Sad to say, there's a seed of truth in all of these
Yeah, of course.
stereotypes.
Everywhere, though.
And I think that's a challenge of being a Muslim woman right now. On the one hand, we are having to challenge some of the attitudes which do hold us back. We have to be honest about that. And even when working and challenging that, we're still trying to take our menfolk with us. We're not trying to do it in opposition to them or in some sense of, oh, we're all superior, because that's unhelpful. And I
Well,
don't
that's
think
an important
That's
point.
not an
Yeah.
Islamic
Absolutely.
attitude. You know, it's not about proving which
Well,
gender
then it becomes
is.
fitna.
Yes, but again, the challenge is to do it with a balance where you're firm enough to challenge attitudes where they're wrong, but you're doing it in a constructive way, which is about really strengthening the family in the long term.
That there is that focus that we are not against, for example, our male counterparts, or that we are not, and we have to be careful with that, because if
And
we
we're not
do get
fighting
into
to be men.
we're not fighting to. We
we're
don't want to be
comfortable being
exactly.
women.
Yeah, we don't want to be like that in that
I know,
sense of
don't
equality.
set your sights so low. That's what I say. Thank you very much
You're most welcome.
for being with us, and we hope for tawfiq in what you do. We're very proud of you, Salma, and the community is very fortunate to have somebody like you as an advocate for them, and we wish you a lot of tawfiq in everything you do. So thank you for giving us the time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Alhamdulillah, we're still in London, and we're actually in the Florence Nightingale Museum with Sister Sabah Khalid, who I've known for a long, long time, and who has had quite an impact, I think, on a lot of the women, Muslim women in the UK. You have a very interesting history and intellectual history as well, and feminism has been an area of great interest to you. And I know that you are also know quite well Germaine Greer, who wrote The Whole Woman. I mean, that's the only book that I've read, but I mean, she wrote The Female Eunuch.
She wrote a
and
series of books.
several books.
The most formative, as far as I was concerned, was one she wrote in published in 1984, called Sex and Destiny.
Right.
in a sense, I think that was the best book she wrote, because it puts women in a context. She portrays them as part of an environment, part of a habitat, if you like, and that the habitat, which she calls the family with a big capital F, has been lost to women, and through that loss they have lost a lot of their nature and a lot of their independence, because what she says, the economy was in the family in that big sense, in the
which is what economia in Greek originally meant, the domestic.
Yeah.
It was the actual household. It came from that word.
Yes, it did.
Yes.
And domestic didn't have that terrible kind of bourgeois consumeristic sense to it that it has today. There's the public world, and then you go inside this dreadful sort of, which she describes as well, the little consumer box which you have with your household gods, and your fridge and your computer and these little kind of things organized around in the house. And she talks about how that has affected the relationship between men and women, and also inevitably children and the whole society.
You became Muslim before I did, but I think what we got early on was a glimpse of really a vestige of what existed in the Muslim world. There's a beautiful thing that Pound says in his book on culture, called Culture. He says, I don't know what force emerged in the 7th century from the Arabian Peninsula that led to 300 mosques in Cordoba and countless books and libraries, but I got a glimpse of it in the way the Moor walked in 1913 in Tangier. And I just thought that was such a stunning description of of human dignity.
Given we're talking presumably now in the Arab world, virtually, in the virtual sense, I'd like to put before the Muslims in that part of the world to beware, because this is already consuming Islam, this virtual world.
Yes.
And Allah transmits the wisdom of the deen through His creation. The haqq, the bil haqq, the samawati wal ard is created bil haqq. And that they must be conscious that the more that they surrender to the electronic project and to the corporate project, they can recite Quran from morning till night. They can have it taped, recorded on all kinds of wonderful newfangled processes, DVDs or anything else, but they will not understand anything, because it is transmitted through the signs. The signs are on the earth and in ourselves, and we have to be able to read them. And I think that the loss of that is actually affecting the Muslims, and they're becoming like inward turning. When they're together, they talk about the past, they talk about how wonderful Islam is, and how there's all these wonderful stories of what it was like and what the people were like. But actually, Quran should not be an object of worship. It's not an end in itself. And it is actually a gift from Allah to understand the situation in which we find ourselves today. We have to understand the nature of the sickness that afflicts the world today.
Yes.
Otherwise, the Quran is like a self-indulgence. The teachings are a self-indulgence. The discussion between each other about how wonderful this woman was or this man was and how wonderfully is a waste of time. It's not our life. Our life is to bring the deen into the world in such a way that it becomes intelligible to people and it becomes a cure.
One of the things the Prophet ﷺ said about the latter days is يُصْبِحُ الْحَلِيمُ حَيْرَانًا, that people of quietude become disquieted.
Yeah.
Do you know that it becomes so perplexing? There's a lot of hayra. I mean, we are living in a very difficult time. When I go to the Arab world, and I've been going there now for almost 30 years, each visit I see diminishment, and it's very troubling for me. And they don't see what they're losing. Do you see? We here in the West, we've lost it, and now it's literally, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this. That they're like, we want all of this, and
poison.
It's the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
You know, it's beware of Greeks bearing gifts, and I'm part Greek. You know? But it's the Trojan horse, and technology is part of it. It's going to make your life wonderful. Yeah. It's really difficult.
I think, but that's why you have to identify exactly what's happened. You have to look at it almost forensically. You have to look at it. What's going on? One, we're individuated. So what do? Jamaat. Get together, because that's one battle. That's one resistance movement. It's not. Shaitan. You don't blow yourself up, which is the opposite, where you disintegrate yourself. You pull together. And you don't just pull together in a formal sense in a Jamaat, in a mosque, and a religious way. You start to integrate socially. It has to go beyond just this Jamaat.
Exactly.
They've got to stop building all these mosques.
No, you need
these prestige buildings.
But the mosque was,
and they have to
community.
focus. The Arabs have to recognize they must help us women, Muslim women, to rebuild the Jamaat who are going to go in the beautiful mosques. Because you can build a beautiful mosque till you're blue in the face, and you've got it full of empty people and people who are dealing drugs in the back row, and people who are going to blow themselves up in the next. Yeah. They have to put their resources into the recreation of Islamic lifestyle.
Content.
Yeah.
So the form has content.
Yeah, and that means giving us a chance to be in nature. Putting our children in natural environments again, raising them together.
Putting our women as well.
You know, we just have a few more minutes, and I just wanted to bring up Florence Nightingale. And Florence, to me, in terms of Western women, she really represents somebody who just went against all of the conventions of her time. Mm-hmm. She was such an independent person, and when she went to Egypt, she actually went to she wanted to get away, and there was kind of an Egypt mania in Victorian England. Yeah. A lot of people, but she was from that first group before it became very popular. She went in the 1840s. But one of the things that really struck me in her diary is her experience of Islam, and she gets to a point where she goes into a mosque. It was Sultan Hassan Mosque. And she said that she was struck with this overwhelming feeling that she'd found the religion that she'd been looking for all of her life, because she felt the pure unity of God was being articulated in the architecture of the mosque. And she said it was something she'd never found in the churches of England. And she lamented, she said, if only there was a place for women in this religion. And she was quite horrified by the conditions of women in Egypt at the time. She was very troubled by the way that they were treated. In the end, she actually said at the end of her diary, she said, my heart kept telling me, turn to Mecca, turn to Mecca, turn to Mecca. There's only one God, there's only one God, there's only one God. Sayyidah Sabah, it's really been an honor to have you today, and thank you for taking your time. And I hope some of these meanings might penetrate the hearts of some of the people that hear them. May Allah increase you in tawfiq and what you're doing. So thank you very much.
And to you as well. Thank you very much for this opportunity
thank you for being here with us.
To move Islam forward, inshallah. So thank you very much, Sheikh Hamza.
When you think of the two words, women and Islam, the religion Islam, what comes to mind?
Probably one word would be very devoted. Another would be community, I think.